if I could open the floor now to questions, please. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Steph Jackson. Hi. I was at a presentation earlier this week by Naomi Simpson, the entrepreneur, and she was talking about giving yourself permission to put things aside in your life and kind of leave them behind in order to go where you want to go. And the examples she gave was she gave up watching the news and she gave up ironing. I was wondering, pretty jealous about that. I was wondering if there's anything that you could reflect on that you've put by the side so you could get to where you were going.
Well, yes, as I got promotions, I told myself the next promotion I get a cleaning lady and the next one a gardener. So things like that are easy to put aside. I think, sadly, I've had to put aside a lot of personal reading. I do a lot of reading, but it's always of things I need to read for what I'm doing. One always needs to make sacrifices, but on the other hand, sacrifices of cleaning and gardening were not hard for me.
Thank you very much, Governor. Really appreciated your words, and I think they spoke not only to all of the women in the audience, but also to the men. I wonder, though, do you feel the strain of the expectations of all of the women, not only of Western Australia, but of Australia, because you really are a leader in that you are the first in so many roles, very, very strong leadership roles. Does that expectation, weigh on your shoulders?
I see. I think that expectation is there for a lot of women. A friend asked her sons, who run their own business, what they thought of International Women's Day, and they said they didn't know much about it. And I think that's a pity, because it should be a day for men and women, because as I emphasise, men and women need to work together to overcome any inequities. But what they said, she then asked them, well, do the women in your office work any differently to the men? And he said, oh yes, definitely. And she said, what do they do? And he said, they work harder. So I think I've always felt a burden of needing to work harder. And to tell the truth, I have had to bring that to this job, because previous governors had a governor and a wife, and the governor had some patronages and the wife others. And I looked at it and I thought the patronages of both were worthwhile. I couldn't very well say, oh, don't worry, the wife had those ones, I won't take them on. So yes, I think you have a burden of working harder. This job I find a little bit hard, because you're in the public eye more and you don't know who knows you, and so I've upped my dress standard. But other than that, no. I think if you went into a job without anticipating that you'd like it, it's a bit like that confidence thing that I was talking about. If I came into this job thinking, oh, I'm not going to like it, that would be stupid. So I've come into the job saying I'm going to like it, and it has been a wonderful opportunity to meet so many wonderful people who are doing great things, and indeed to meet people who are really disadvantaged and are overcoming it. I met a wonderful boy who was 12 who had cerebral palsy, and the really wonderful thing about him, he was going to high school and he couldn't walk fast enough to go between the classes in high school, but one of the Rotary clubs paid to modify a Segway for him. So instead of having a wheelchair to go between classes, he has a Segway. How wonderful is that? And he was probably the most polite person I've met since I've taken this job. He was just so polite and interested in things. And interesting enough, when I chatted to him and his parents, he was talking about when he leaves home. He's only 12 now, and he's talking about leaving home at 17. And I said, well, my sons at 30 and 24 are still with me. And the parents were pleased to hear that, because I think he was overdoing the trying to be normal and thinking it's normal to do this, I need to show I can do it. So I meet some wonderful people with that kind of inspiration.
Thank you, Governor. It was an excellent talk, and it's always a pleasure listening to the history of Edith Cowan. Elizabeth Ree, I was just wondering if you've got any good strategies with your leadership techniques that you've improved and excelled in over the years, of which to encourage good decision makers, particularly on the political level, because we know that leadership and changing an organisation is within, but as you've shown, you get a good leader at the top and it can actually filter down to make an excellent organisation. So as people have to vote in local, state and federal parliament, and we look at the parliamentary laws and the changes, in particular local government, what's going on at the moment, how do people encourage good decision makers? How do people know that a person is going to be a good decision maker to encourage and foster a good organisation, please?
Well, I'm a great believer that you get much better decisions through teamwork. If you get input from others, I've had many examples where I was going to make a particular decision, then I sit down and talk to people about it and realise that something somebody else has suggested is actually better. So that's where I come back to Stephen Covey's point about seek first to understand before being understood. And I think there needs to be a lot more consultation, dare I say, and learning from others. That doesn't mean that you don't have to make the hard decisions, and there were a lot of times where I had to make a decision which maybe I knew not everyone would agree with, but I do feel that you make better decision making if you have a value of teamwork and you try to do it. And I should say that, and this is a generalisation, that I think women are actually better at teamwork. That is a generalisation, guys, so and there are many men who are excellent at teamwork, but I think that's critical.
Thank you, Governor. It was fascinating to hear about your journey and in parallel the journey of Edith Cowan. And I have to say, just incidentally, that's the first time I've heard that whole story, and quite inspiring on both counts. I wanted to ask you a question. Towards the end of your remarks, you commented on the fact that for many years, probably 30 years now, we've had women graduating at higher rates than men from university, and yet when we look at senior levels in organisations, still we seem to be picking the vast majority of our leaders from only 50% of our population. And you've obviously been an employer of hundreds, if not thousands, of people throughout the various roles that you've held, and now you're in a very senior leadership position at the very pinnacle of our state. Are there things that you've been doing or that you would like to recommend as... Because one thing I hear people saying is we'd love to have more women in our leadership teams, but we sort of don't know what to do to ensure that that happens. Do you have thoughts, tangible ideas, tips and tricks for everyone in the audience about things we can all do to encourage that?
Yeah, I think it's continue in our roles and role model, but it's also that whole aspect of unconscious bias, which I think is quite true. As you interview people, you're sometimes looking unconsciously for people in your own model. So if 3/4 of the people are men, then that will come into it as well. But I do feel the confidence issue is very big. So I've tried mentoring. And interesting enough, I was more successful with mentoring the guys than the women, but the women ended up getting the job. So they sometimes don't always need mentoring, but just mentoring and encouraging them and saying, why aren't you applying for the job? If I looked at my career, the last 4 jobs I've had, I was asked if I'd go and do them, but I probably wouldn't have applied because, as I said, with Fremantle Ports, I would have thought, well, I needed port operational experience. And this particular role I've got now, I wouldn't have thought of applying for. So, no, you probably can't. But I think giving people the confidence to speak out and to try. But the more role models people see, the more likely it is for women to succeed. I read an article in the West this week, and I'll mention this one as well because I thought this was an interesting point. I'm worried about the lack of girls studying STEM subjects. And this particular article was saying that a factor that they felt was there for women was in the kind of economy we have, which is commodity driven. If less girls are studying STEM subjects, they'll have lesser career opportunities because more of the jobs require STEM type skills. And Australia's chief scientist had said that the majority of future jobs are going to require STEM type skills. So the more we can do, and I was pleased to have a chat earlier about Edith Cowan and Edith Cowan University, and the fact that more of the education, the students studying education are studying maths and science. I think that's great. We need to, at the primary school level, get people to enthuse the young people and certainly to encourage them. In fact, Tracy, just last night we heard that, didn't we? A good story about that. So yes, I think there are many things for women, but I do think that the role modelling is quite critical, because it certainly helped me in my own perception of women when I saw women appointed as ministers.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Tony Lazara from Edith Cowan. You may recall we worked together many years ago in the Department of Transport. And you have been a role model for me. You were the first manager I saw who was a nice person, both in, in the job and didn't change. And I guess my question is around that. As a female leader, do you feel there is more pressure to be hard-nosed? And I know you haven't changed. I've watched your career over the years. And how have you managed that, if you feel there was that pressure to be more hard-nosed as a female in those senior leadership positions in male environments?
I have had to be hard-nosed on some decisions, there's no doubt about that. But I actually have a lot of empathy with people. And I think you have got to look at people's circumstances and talk to them. And that's where I was speaking about my own view, but the leadership model, I was sitting back blaming them. And I thought, oh, hang on a minute. I haven't set out my expectations. I haven't discussed it. How could I then criticise them for not doing what I want? So I think it's really important to open your mind to what's causing things. And often it's not the person. I mean, everyone comes to work wanting to do a good job. And if they don't do a good job, what are the circumstances? I remember one of the guys I worked with at Fremantle, he's a blue-collar person, and I remember towards the end of my career introducing to people and saying, this person has worked here for 30 years. And he said, no, I haven't. He said, I've only worked since you arrived. He said, I've been here for 30 years. So I mean, I guess it's creating the climate where people want to work is so critical, and sympathising with them and empathising.
We have two hands, one there and then here, and that might have to be it for okay, three. Please.
Thank you, Governor. It was really good to hear you speak and talk about confidence and feeling positive about yourself in the workplace. I really wanted to ask a question kind of building on role models and confidence. I was wondering how you feel about quotas on boards and affirmative action for employment, because I know while that can build confidence and give role models to some women, maybe some other people might perceive it as you're only hiring them because they're female and not because of their merit. And I just wanted to get your opinion on that.
Yes. I'm not in favour of quotas, but one thing I think that has worked well is saying that in the shortlist for a particular job, you want at least one woman or two women so that they're actually interviewed. And I've seen that work very well. And that leads to people seeking out more. I've seen it also work with people with disability. In an organisation I was involved with, St John of God Healthcare, said that for the clerical jobs they would make sure that there was at least one disabled person who was assessed. And that got 20 more jobs given to those people. So there's a difference between a quota but requiring you to spend extra time searching to get some relevant people who can be competitive. And that's what I think is probably a better way of doing it. At the same time, I am conscious that certainly it's been a very slow rate of increase and not really an adequate rate of increase.
Hello, I'm Helen Ruak and I'm from WAPA at Edith Cowan University. I'm the course coordinator for the Arts Management program, so I incorporate into my course teachings in leadership and management. Interestingly, arts management is a very feminised industry, and it's not so interesting really because it comes from people working in the arts and then wanting to work into management of the arts. Another interesting fact is most leadership roles in arts management, those senior management roles, actually are given to men. Similarly, I suppose early childhood teaching and care is very feminised, and similarly they are the worst paid jobs. So how can we overcome not so much the feminisation of core industries, but low paid work in what is perceived as a feminine workplace?
Yeah, that's a very hard one, isn't it? I think teaching and nursing were probably both in that category. I think teaching has been helped a bit. I mean, teaching is so critical to the future of children that people have recognised that, and I think and I hope that that will also come in early childhood as well. Nursing, there's been a trend, as you're probably aware, to nurse practitioners and giving more promotion within that. But the leadership roles, I think it's more a matter of encouraging some of the women who are really good to keep applying for the leadership roles, because and getting rid of any unconscious bias. Otherwise, I don't necessarily have any answers, but the unconscious bias can be a big thing. We all need to study it. I mean, I don't think any of us have a total answer, but there was some research by Bain and Company for CEW relatively recently, which was saying that one of the things which encourages women to work in organisations was that if that's a place where there are more women. So as you get more women into the senior management, well, then more will be encouraged to apply, probably.
And last question, please, Irene.
Yeah, thank you for your talk. It's not a question, I just want to share something with you. When I first went to a women's meeting with women in the early 80s, I thought it was a lot of women hating men and their husbands.
In the 80s it was.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and I got up and said, well, I've got a husband, what's wrong with men? And then they explained to me what it was, but yes, so, and I'm also glad that you're in the same boat with us. We got our boys at home too.
You would?
Yes, still. So you're one of us. But but that's all I wanted to say. Just share that little bit and to tell you that,
yes.
we're glad.
I'm actually happy to have my sons at home with me because they're very good and they're very helpful.
Yeah, and mine too.
Exactly.
He pays all the bills and he does the lawn and washes up at night and so
exactly.
Yeah.
So we could be happy about that.
Yeah.
But that's where I think feminism got a bad name, isn't it? Because it looked like the women were anti-men. And the disappointing thing, the good thing is I see some men here today. The bad thing is that these meetings are perceived as having more women and more women come. And really it should be men and women working together to overcome disadvantage.
Right.
So thank you particularly to the men who are here today. In fact, we should clap them, shouldn't we, women?